Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Jack Mitchell, and welcome to WHYZ HR, everything you want to know about human resources. Let me ask you a question. How many company executives should be involved in the interview process? We'll have the answer for you during the show. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jack Mitchell, and it's a pleasure to welcome all of you back to WHYZ HR, everything you want to know about human resources. This is our attempt to share with you, whether you be an employee or an employer or an HR professional, some of the insights of how a professional HR person would look at HR issues. And we've been talking about staffing. And tonight we're going to cover in particular the whole thing about interviewing. And when I said that we have professionals considering and talking about these issues, my celebrity co-host for this month is one of those real HR pros. And it's my pleasure to welcome her again to our show, the wonderful Director of Human Resources for the city of Port St. Lucie, Natalie Cabrera. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you for having me back.
Okay, wonderful. Natalie, just a couple of things. Why don't you tell the folks about our bell?
So whenever we have a great idea or think something that you should specifically pay attention to, you'll hear us ring that bell. And that's just a memorializing the importance of what we're saying.
That's right. Okay. Also, if you have any questions, then feel free to just put them in your chat, and we see them here on the monitor, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. If you don't want your name, if you do chat with us, your name will show on the screen. If you prefer not to have your name shown, then that's okay. Just email me directly, and during the week I will either respond or will answer your questions at next week's show. So just send your any questions you have to Dr. Jack at WHYZHR.com. Dr. Jack at WHYZ, and WHYZ is spelled WHYZ, WHYZHR.com. Okay? What do you think? Let's get going right into the show.
Let's go.
Okay, wonderful. We were talking about over the past weeks the whole concept of staffing, which is perhaps, I think, one of the most important roles that a manager has to fulfill in their position. Because if you hire the right person, it's wonderful. And if you hire the wrong person, it's a disaster.
And costly.
And then what I've always been concerned about, Natalie, is if you hire someone who's neither really good or really bad, and you're stuck with someone who's pretty mediocre, that's a tough one, because it's really difficult to either motivate that person, or if they don't get motivated and become better than just mediocre, you really can't have mediocre people on your team, especially nowadays with all the challenges that you have. So staffing becomes really, really important, that you do everything you possibly can to identify the very best candidate.
The right candidate.
You know, and a real pro doesn't care whether they're white, they're black, they're male, they're female, how old they are, whether they're straight, gay, it doesn't make any difference. What we're really looking for is the best candidate. And everything about this whole staffing process and what we've been talking about has to do with finding the right person with the right skills and the right temperament for that job to get the best candidate possible. And so we will get into just a little while about in the interviewing process to stay away from any of those questions that don't have specific input into finding out who's the best candidate, as opposed to their religion, their age, their background, all those kind of things.
Those are the no-no questions.
Those are the no.
Those will get you into trouble.
We'll get into them a little bit.
Sure.
But the important thing is really focusing on identifying the best candidate possible and hiring that person. And today, what are some of the major challenges you face as an HR? Just a little background. Why don't you tell the folks just a little of your role in the city, then I'll explain a little of my role, because we're both professional HR executives. We both have considerable years of experience, but I work as an independent HR consultant, and you work as, front line, to say the least, front line, middle line, and back line HR executive in your organization. Just tell the folks a little about what the city of Port St. Lucie is like from an HR point of view.
So we are the seventh largest city in the state of Florida. We employ over 1,200 employees,
Wow.
which we have a 14-person HR department. We do everything from hiring, recruiting, onboarding, wages, compensation, discipline, outboarding, offboarding, everything from A to Z. We do it all for our employees. And it's very challenging.
Yeah.
It can be very, very challenging. And staffing is very important, as you mentioned, and getting that right candidate, because it becomes very costly when you have to recruit and bring somebody else in, onboard them. All of that is time, money, and it can become very costly for an organization if you don't hire right.
Yeah. So what we've talked about before is we've talked about the whole thing of sourcing. Where do you find candidates? And so if you look at some of our past shows, and they're all on Treasure Coast TV on Roku, you can go there and see our shows. Or you can go to TCoastStudios.com and you'll see all of our past shows. But we spend quite a bit of time on sourcing because that's really a major challenge today.
Mm-hmm.
And then we added some other points, but then another major point we talked about was resumes. Just share just a little bit of a couple of the key points, if you recall, that we talked about with regard to resumes.
Sure. I think if you're doing a resume, you want to do a resume that stands out, that grabs attention. But at the same time, you want to make sure you don't have any grammatical errors, spelling errors, that those stand out, no gaps in your time. You want to account for any gap periods so that they're not questioning what you've been doing or working on for a period of time. I think that's important. And it needs to be fresh and relevant. So you need to update it pretty often as you gain new skills and new education, new certifications. I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too on that point is that I've seen people use the same resume for every job that they're looking for. And that really doesn't help you. If you can really focus the key points of your resume to that specific job, it shows that you're really interested in that job as opposed to just a general resume.
What do you think about cover letters, Jack?
I think most of us like cover letters. I think most HR professionals would prefer a cover letter. It gives us there's so little that we can deal with. In other words, the initial looking at a candidate, we have a resume, and there's really no feeling to a resume.
I think the cover letter gives you that inside perspective to that person.
And so we're
your
trying
opportunity to sell yourself.
And we're trying to get as much of a feel for the individual, how they come across. And so that cover letter can be really, really important. And you can say things in your cover letter that you can't really communicate in that resume.
Sure. In that cover letter, you can express your passion for that position or the organization and why it calls to you and why you think you would be a good fit.
And it does take research, because one of the things we talked about in past shows is to do your homework. So if you're going to be writing to company ABC, make sure you look up ABC and Google it and go to their website and really get a flavor for that company, and then write your cover letter to respond to the particular job that they're looking for.
Excellent point.
Okay.
You
Thank you very much. Okay, that's a good one. Let's after that. I'm too excited. So we're going to go into a commercial break. We'll be back right after the commercial.
Well, we've primarily used the DISC assessments with Dr. Jack to hire a number of senior managers. Your assistance with this, which to me is really important. The DISC assessment speaks for itself and is proven to be, a very, very accurate tool. And as you've educated us how to interpret it, it is relatively easy to interpret, but I do appreciate the fact that we're doing it in conjunction with you and that you are helping us interpret and dig deeper than we could on our own. So, I mean, the results speak for themselves.
Thank you, Paul, for those nice words about my involvement with you and your organization with regard to personality assessments. We covered that last week, the whole assessment. I am really a major fan of utilizing anything we can to help us get a better insight into that candidate. And one of the things that I'm very strong on are these personality assessments, and the instrument, they're not a test, they're an instrument.
Right, no wrong or right
Your
answer.
personality is your
Mhm.
personality. It's the
Mhm.
way you've made you and the way you've grown and developed. And so there's no right or wrong answers to that. So we don't call it a test, it's called an instrument. But I think one of the things that I think that some of my clients really appreciate the fact that they're able to talk with me about those assessments. My background, as a psychologist and as an HR person and as a lawyer, I have a few different hats that I've worn over
Sounds like
my
it.
career, that I'm able to add a certain depth to that interpretation of those assessments. And I think that adds a real value to my clients. So, Paul, thank you for those kindly words. Interviewing. Okay. From an employee point of view, what would you say should be going through the mind of a candidate as they're preparing for their interview? How would you?
One thing I think is important is to practice. I think you need to.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I think you.
That's
Yeah,
a new
thank you.
idea. Go ahead. Okay.
I think you need to practice on what you're going to say, how you're going to present different ideas and concepts. Why are you interested in this position? Why do you feel you'd be a good fit or a good candidate? Those type of things. You need to practice your answers. So that way, when you're in front of, you don't know sometimes if you're walking into a panel interview
Mhm.
or a one-on-one interview. So it's good to be prepared, practice, and have some prepared answers.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. Yeah, there are some basic questions that they may or may not ask you.
And you can even Google questions that are asked in interview.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, and you can get a plethora of questions that are asked typical questions that are asked during an interview.
Okay,
Very
so
helpful.
yeah, if you can, because one of the things we're going to be looking for, that the interviewer is going to be looking for, is how articulate are you, so that when you're asked a question, that you're able to speak intelligently and so forth. So if you practice and you have some you've thought about it, then you're way ahead of the game.
Sure.
And so you're not
Preparation is key.
You're not going to be tongue-tied. Okay. What about dressing for?
Oh, big one. Dress for the job you want, not the job you have. That is my motto.
Okay. Okay. We're going to give her another one on that one. Say that again, because that's really important.
Dress for the job you want and not the job that you have.
That first impression really is a first impression, and it is lasting.
Absolutely.
That when you come in for that interview, I know that it's a tense situation.
Oh, it's nerve-wracking.
It's
for
nerve-wracking
sure.
for
Mhm.
almost everyone. I don't know anyone that's really comfortable coming in for an interview, because it's, people have done it a number of times and they want to get the job, but they may not get the job. And it's a very stressful type of thing. So anything
Don't chew gum during an interview.
yeah,
It's important.
that's very good. The thing is that you have to make the best impression that you can. So they're looking at you, the employer, the potential employers looking at you, not only from the skills that you have, but also the way you present yourself.
Absolutely.
Are you going to fit into their organization? Do you carry yourself with the same kind of poise? Are you smiling and so forth? Especially a job that requires customer service. Boy, if you don't come in with a natural smile, you're not going to have much of a chance in that interview.
Well, and I think also, even if you're not applying for an executive level position or something like that, even an entry level position, you want to look your best and you want to come in there looking professionally.
That's right.
And I think it's irrelevant of the job that you're seeking. It's what you're presenting as you.
That's correct. Excellent. Okay. From an employer's point of view, how does an employer prepare themselves and before the actual interview itself?
Well, I think you update the job description
Yep.
to make sure it fits for what you're currently looking for. Job descriptions get outdated pretty frequently. So you need to be in touch with your hiring managers to make sure that that is up to par and what you're actually looking for. Then I think from there, you develop your questions and what you're going to be asking. And that depends on what you're exactly looking
Yeah.
for. I like to include behavior-based questions because you want to know a little bit about the person, not just what their skill sets are.
Mhm. One of the things too, you have to decide and if you have an HR department, then you're really fortunate because the HR professional usually orchestrates that
True.
interview
Mhm.
and decides whether it's just going to be the hiring manager who's going to interview, whether it's going to be just the HR professional who's going to interview,
Supervisor.
whether it's going to be a supervisor, whether it's going to be one-on-one, whether it's going to be panels.
Mhm.
Do you have a preference for yourself?
I typically like to have an interview, conduct an interview with more than one person for sure.
As interviewers?
As interviewers.
Really? Okay.
Preference, my personal preference is not a panel because that's very nerve wracking to the candidate. And I think for any employers out there that are doing panel interviews, you should let the candidate know that. It just, they know what they're walking into. It just gives them a little sense of ease
Yeah.
than walking into a room and having to sit down with 5 people to, go over those questions. It's nerve wracking.
Yeah, I think unless it's really a C-level job, I really don't think you should have more than, I could see 5 people in a panel for that kind of position.
Mhm.
But any job below, a vice president, executive director,
2 to 3 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no problem with 2 to 3, but I think that you can overwhelm unless the job really does demand a lot of, it's a very stress-filled job. If the job itself, the nature of the job is one in which there's a lot of stress involved in pressure in the job, then you may want to have 2 or 3 people in that interview
Mm.
causing it stressful. Most of my interviews, I personally like to do individually because I like to put the person, my style is to put the person kind of at ease and have kind of a friendly conversation with the person, knowing exactly in my head what I want to get out of that conversation. But I try to do it in such a way that it's non-intimidating.
Mhm.
And so the candidate feels that they are really able to explain themselves and why they think they'd be an excellent candidate.
I think in my perspective, it's kind of comforting to have additional people there because you may be so focused on one question and they may pick up on something that you may have missed. So that's just
Yep.
my personal preference.
Yep.
But it does work both ways,
Yep.
and I think you get a more personal experience with a one-on-one than you do with
Well,
more than one person.
I would, in many cases, I will have myself, I'll interview the candidate, and then there'll be the hiring manager who also is going to interview.
Like a second interview?
A second
Okay.
interview,
Mhm.
usually at the same time, so
Oh.
that you don't have to call the people back and forth and so forth. And what I try to do is I personally will try to identify 2 or 3 of the technical skills that I'm looking for
Mhm.
in that position. And I'll also identify 2 or 3 of the personality traits that I'm looking for. And I will ask questions, and I know in my head, those are the 3 to 6 questions that I feel are really important, that I really want to clarify,
Mhm.
that will identify whether this person I think is going to be excellent in the job. And I'll share that with the hiring manager. I'll say, okay, I'm going to question about these 3 things.
Mhm.
What technical skills do you focus on? So we're not just duplicating
The questions.
efforts. So that's how again, I'm a consultant, and so I come in to a situation, and so I have my role, but the hiring manager, so my role is different than
Sure.
you
Mhm.
in terms of you're there, as an employer. I'm not an employer.
Right.
I'm kind of an outside expert that comes in to help usually smaller companies that don't have the pleasure of having a professional like yourself and a team that you folks have. But that's how I would arrange it with my clients, that I would handle, and I identify the skills that I'm going to be talking about, and the technical and the personality skills, and I then I discuss that with the hiring manager and identify what skills, technical and personality skills that he or she should be looking for.
Another thing I think too is limit your questions. You don't want to have 25 questions to ask a candidate. I would save them for, like you said, a second interview. If there are some questions that you just absolutely have to ask, I would save those to the second interview. I wouldn't do more than 12, 15 questions at most.
And I don't think of, in my head, I don't think about questions. I think about, I want to talk to them about, I want to have a discussion about the particular skill.
Discussion's great because you get a lot of information out of a discussion as opposed to an interview question.
But I try to use just what's called a behavioral based, and you use that phrase, the behavioral based questions. So I know that one of the things I'm looking for in this particular job as a marketing director, for example, I know that one of the technical skills that I'm going to be looking for is their social media technical skills. So I will ask them a question, tell me about an event you had where you had to use the social media and why was it successful? I use a mnemonic code. I use the word EAR, E-A-R. And EAR for me, when I interview, it's E stands for, give me an example. Tell me about a time when you had to use social skills as a social media to organize a program that you wanted. So E stands for, give me an example. A stands for action. What actions did you take?
Very good.
Was it you that did it? Was it your boss?
Part of the team.
What action? Was it a team thing? Was it your initiation? So give me an example of that. And then what were the results? And tell me, what did you learn from that experience? So I try to always be thinking about the three technical skills, the three personality skills. I'm asking for EARs, E-A-Rs. And so
have to remember that, Jack.
Okay. Okay, so I think that just helps me, and I share that with my clients. Use the EARs. Think about, and I heard one time one of my colleagues said, he who gets the most EARs wins. So the idea is, who gives you the best example, the best actions, and the best results? And what you're doing actually as an interviewer, you're judging those EARs that you're hearing. And if one person shares with you, well, this is the example of a time when I had to set up an event through social media. And it was a huge event, and I did a lot of A, B's, and C's, and the results were terrific. Then that's going to be more impressive to me than someone who just used a little bit and really didn't have this. So I'm weighing the quality of those
responses, sure.
And that's what I will base my decision on, those kind of things. Okay. What about yourself in terms of, now you said you like to kind of prepare 10 to 12 questions.
10 to 12 questions that some will highlight their, behavior based. So we know what kind of candidate we're interviewing. Some will be more technical on the aspects of the job, their related experience. And that pretty much sums it up as far as the questions.
Now, do you write those questions down?
We do, yes.
And do you give them are you usually the one, or do you have a person who heads up?
Well, each department has a hiring manager.
Okay.
And they have sets questions that they asked.
Okay.
We have a database where we keep questions to assist them in. We'll help them formulate those questions and put those out.
Okay.
So each department has its own hiring manager.
We're going to talk about some of the things you don't ask
Okay.
after this commercial break. So stay with us, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Some of the benefits that we've received from the Leadership Institute is, one, getting to know what your work style is, and just finding better ways or the best way to communicate with not only your team, but with people in general. And I found this leadership training to be something I did not imagine. It's been very enjoyable. It's very interactive. And I'm learning things about myself that I didn't know before. It really makes you think and look at things in a different perspective.
Thank you, Ollie. One of the things, Natalie, that we do in WHYZ HR is not just the recruiting piece, but we do a lot of workshops and institutes. And Ollie happens to be a participant in an institute that I've been doing. And it's really trying to work with managers and helping them to become really a highly effective management team. And it's wonderful that Ollie would say those nice things. So
Very nice.
it's another thing that we do that I just love doing. I don't know whether I like recruiting more than I like doing workshops and institutes. Institutes for me I don't like just a single workshop. I hardly ever do just a single workshop because I feel that a couple of weeks afterwards, even the best trainer, and I consider myself a master trainer, but even the best of trainers, the participants will forget things.
Mhm.
They have to be, as a psychologist, I believe those kind of learnings have to be reinforced.
I
So
agree.
if I do a workshop, then 30 days later, I will do an executive or a group coaching session to make sure that what we were talking about in training is actually implemented.
Cool.
An institute is a series of a number, actually it's usually 4 different workshops, and each workshop is followed 30 days afterwards with one of these group sessions. So at the end of it's an 8-month program.
Wow.
It's very intense. At the end of 8 months, you have a team of managers that really are really effective. They've been working together, they're talking. And one of the things that this particular institute that I'm doing right now is people are saying that they know each other because they work, but they've never actually sat down with each other and hashed over various aspects of being a manager and being a leader and so
Isn't that
forth.
something? So much can come from collaboration.
So it's been fun. Okay, let's get back. We only have a couple of minutes. In terms of the questions that we shouldn't be asking, why don't you take the lead on this and
Sure.
tell the folks from your point of view, what do you instruct your managers, your hiring managers?
So you should never be asking if someone has children. You shouldn't be asking if they're pregnant. You shouldn't be asking what year they graduated from high school. That can actually give you an insight into how old somebody is, which could potentially set you up for a discrimination claim.
That's right.
Gosh, Jackie put me on the spot. I mean, think
Yeah.
of what else we could ask.
The-
Not ask.
Yeah, the idea is, I try not to worry about how much I shouldn't ask. If you focus on
The
what
right
the job
questions.
is,
Yeah.
stay with that. If you're a young HR professional, stay away from any questions that are not specifically geared for that particular job, either the technical skills or the personality skills. Once you get off that, and one of the dangers is we HR people tend to be pretty friendly.
Sure.
And
It can come up in conversation, and now you're privy to that knowledge.
the thing is that, but legally, you're responsible, you HR professionals are responsible for the quality of that interview. And so you can't say, well, I didn't, the candidate brought that up. Well, the fact is you're responsible. So
You can't
candidate-
unknow what you
candidate may
hear.
bring something up, but you got to go time out.
Right.
That's really not important. So if it's anything that has to do with any of the protected classes
Absolutely.
of, what church do you go to? Do you go to
Race,
church?
religion,
Race, religion, any of those kinds of
sexual
things.
orientation.
That's right. So
Mhm.
anything like that, and, you try to be friendly and you say, oh, wow, are you Italian?
Are you married?
Are you married?
Mm-hmm.
One of the big ones is, what's your maiden name? I know your name is Mrs. Smith, but you certainly look like you're, Mediterranean.
Right, right,
What's your maiden name?
right.
That's, in other words, that's going to be into national origin. And so you
Mhm.
don't want to get into those realms. So there's the only time that you're really going to get in trouble with that if the person doesn't get the job. But if that person doesn't get the job, and there are many of them, most of them are not going to get the job, then you're in deep trouble. Or
Yeah.
you potentially could be,
You're
because
as a
they're going
liability.
to sit at home and say, why didn't I get that job? I was as qualified as anyone else. And I should have
Mhm.
got the job. And then they're going to say, you know what? Dr. Jack asked me about, when did I graduate from high school? Not did I graduate from high school? That's
When,
okay.
Right.
But when? He's trying to find out how old I am. And because,
Mhm.
I get gray hair, then, it's obviously because of my
Didn't hire
age.
me
And so he
because of
didn't
my
hire me.
age.
So I'm going to go and talk to my attorney, who will then contact the employer and say, listen, we're going to potentially sue you for discrimination due to age.
Sure,
So those are kind of the things that we have to stay away from.
definitely.
We covered a lot of territory, and there's still more to cover on this because it's such an important part. We really want you as the employee to have really a good understanding of how you should prepare for having a successful interview. And also, if you're the professional employer or the hiring manager, we really want you to know what you should and shouldn't do and how to really handle a good interview. So tune in next week. If you would, take out your calendars. We're on Tuesday night live at 7:30. And then, as many of you know, we have a terrific number of people who are watching us from all over the country, which is such a thrill. But you can watch us anytime on social media, and we encourage you to do that. And if you have any questions, again, just write them down, Dr. Jack at WHYZ HR. And I want to thank my wonderful celebrity co-host for the month of July, Natalie Cabrera, I think the star of,
My goodness.
of Port St. Lucie. She's our newest director of the department. She's gone through the ranks, and they've just selected the best person possible. We're thrilled for
Thank you.
the city, and we're thrilled for the HR department, and we're thrilled for you, my friend.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you next time at WHYZ HR.
The Greek philosopher Socrates said, "The first step wisdom is to know thyself." Complete a WHYZ DISC personality profile to really know yourself. Get a 93 to 97% accurate 40-page comprehensive report of your personality styles. You'll also have the opportunity to have a phone consultation with an expert in understanding the report.